CR101radio.com, podcasts, and more.
6. The Book of Ruth. Ruth 1. September the 21st, 1954. Good morning, friends. One of the most beautiful stories of all time is the Book of Ruth. This morning we will look at the first chapter and the events which led a woman to say, "Call me no more Naomi," which means pleasant, "but call me Mara, bitter, for my life has become a bitter one." The Book of Ruth tells a story of events that occurred about 13 and a half centuries before Christ. Quote, "In the days when the judges ruled," end quote. It was an era of often unspeakable corruption, of perversity and social chaos. We are told that there was a long drought in the land, or dry spell, which led to a famine and social disaster. Many small farmers lost their places as the crops dried up and fruit trees withered. One such small farmer was Elimelech, husband of Naomi. With their two sons, Elimelech and Naomi hopefully migrated into Moab after losing their farm in Bethlehem. Like the Dust Bowl dwellers of our 1930s, they had no choice but to move. Thus, it was economic necessity which drove this family into Moab, not personal preference. For an Israelite, a Moabite was hardly a fit person to associate with. The Moabites were an immoral people in the main and a low-grade nation. The family had moved to Moab only because they wanted work, and Moab was the place for it. They hoped someday to return to Bethlehem. Then Elimelech died, and Naomi was left with two sons in a strange land. To make matters worse, the two sons, Mahlon and Chilion, married two Moabite girls, Ruth and Ophrah. Naomi's grief at this was perhaps quenched by the character and devotion of the girls and their obvious love of her. Then, to make matters worse, both her sons died, and Naomi was left alone in a foreign land. There was only one thing to do, and Naomi made plans for it immediately: to return to Bethlehem. She had left her hometown with a family, and now she was returning alone. Her daughters-in-law, Ruth and Ophrah, offered to return with her. It was to Naomi's advantage to take the girls, but she thought of their welfare and refused them. Orpah returned to her own parents, but Ruth said, "Entreat me not to leave thee, or to return from following after thee, for whither thou goest I will go, and where thou lodgest I will lodge. Thy people shall be my people, and thy God my God. Where thou diest will I die, and there will I be buried. The Lord do so to me, and more also, if aught but death part thee and me." Verses 16 and 17. And so the two women, Naomi and Ruth, returned to Bethlehem, the hometown girl, now grown old and widowed, together with her foreign daughter-in-law. People had trouble recognizing Naomi. The years had been hard on her. When they spoke to her by name, she bitterly denied her name, Naomi, which means pleasant, and said, "Call me Mara, for the Almighty hath dealt very bitterly with me. I went out full, and the Lord hath brought me home again empty. Why then call ye me Naomi, seeing the Lord hath testified against me, and the Almighty hath afflicted me?" Verses 20 and 21. "Call me Mara," she said, and Mara means bitter. Life had become bitter for Naomi, and she felt bitter about God's treatment of her and her hopes. Many of us feel at times like Naomi. We feel that God has denied us and frustrated us at every point, and resentment pours out of us. And yet God blessed Naomi most of all by this affliction. The very things which were a source of bitterness to Naomi became her greatest and deepest joy, and a worldwide blessing to all nations. The very chain of events which led to her bitterness not only restored her farm, led to the birth of King David and ultimately to Jesus Christ, but left the entire world richer for their recurrence. What to the world is as bitter as death, God makes into a harvest of good to those who trust in Him. Naomi and Ruth were both insignificant people in highly troubled times, but God was working, not only in the great events of the day, but in and through His humblest saints. The book of Ruth tells us that the one true circumstance of faith is God, not environment, death, heredity, grace, class, or any such factor is decisive, but only this, the Lord Himself. If at times, like Naomi, we feel bitter and are tempted to say, "Call me Mara," let us remember that there is no defeat with God to those who love Him and are the called according to His purpose. Of Him we can joyfully say, "Thou art my hiding place, Thou shalt preserve me from trouble, Thou shalt compass me about with songs of deliverance." Psalm 32:7.